So you recommended two teas to me
Yeah.
from the ones that you're selling on your site. One is the Louis Bao 20-year, and the other is the red tea drops.
Yeah.
So which do you want to start with?
We should start with the Liu Bao for sure.
Okay.
I think you're a bit more of a measuring guy than I am. I kind of just wing it.
Oh no, I'm not a measuring guy. I used to do that. I had like a scale and. Now, why did you select the Liu Bao?
So the Liu Bao is a great tea to drink in this time of year because it's at least in Portland it's colder time of year. Liu Bao is generally a warming tea, so it's a black tea in the true sense of the term, fermented, aged,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really good. It's really good at helping the body to warm up and also promoting a person's digestion. So those are kind of the more basic like medical aspects to Liu Bao. But the character of Liu Bao is really soothing, and it helps you kind of embrace. I find that Liu Bao helps me embrace a state of being that's like alert but calmed. A lot of the stuff we call black tea, like in the West, or the British call black tea,
Mm-hmm.
the Chinese call red tea, right?
Right.
So the second tea we're going to drink is a red tea. But this tea is actually called hai cha, which means black tea. And there's only a couple of things that the Chinese actually call black tea, and this is one. It's a legitimate black tea, and this is typically it's picked and it's processed and it's put into bamboo. There's a way that they package it with bamboo, and then it's aged, and it's usually aged for it's aged for different times, and it's the older it gets, kind of the better it is in a lot of cases, if it's good quality material. I've also had Liu Bao that's very, very young, and that was quite an experience. It can be very wild, and if it doesn't have the age, it's quite a different drink.
Right. Do you feel it more? Does it get more of that heady kind of freneticism to it when it's young?
So the version of it that I had that was young was also wild tea, and the thing that stood out about it is that it was really, really bitter and astringent.
Mm.
You had to drink it 5 or 6 times to be able to drink it. It was that strong, which makes me think that like it would be good at treating probably certain kinds of illnesses, but may not be as appropriate for daily drinking tea.
Yeah, I definitely get that calming effect from it. Definitely warming.
Yeah, the warming side for sure.
Definitely a little darker this time around.
It's a couple of. A lot of people will rinse. This is a tea that people will rinse. I feel pretty strong. Tea that's clean doesn't need to be rinsed. It can be, but doesn't need to be. So not to rinse the teas that I have confidence in. So I didn't even rinse mine this time.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges with a tea like this, and having a conversation about it, is it acts against that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it turns off the need to talk about stuff,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's
which is
true.
great. But it's very gentle. Like, you know, I know I've had many puers that have a character of quieting,
Mhm.
but they're also like in a sense like they're like dragging you on a journey, you
Right.
know, on a good journey, right? Like you're going deep with them. But this is like it's very quieting, but at the same time, um, it's not taking me too far from where I am.
That's very similar to my experience of it as well. When people come in and they try this tea, I usually also serve them Liu An or Loy An,
Hmm.
which is another tea that's very similar to this. Um, and except this tea is processed in the way that a black tea would be processed, and then it's aged, and then it goes through its aging and fermenting. Whereas the Liuan or the Loyan is a green tea. It's made like a green tea first, and then it's done that, and it comes from a different part of China as well. Um, but I usually tell them I feel like these two teas together are like a brother and a sister, and if you drink them next to each other, they play. It's like they have there's a dialogue, like there's a
Uh,
that takes place. I feel like Liu Bao is more masculine side, and Liu An or Loy An, people pronounce it differently. That's why I keep saying the two.
Whatever way I pronounce things, people pronounce them always differently because I'm pronouncing them incorrectly. So
Yeah,
if you're
right,
just doing one correctly, then you're good.
right. All we can ask for, right?
Like,
Um,
cause I know I often catch myself saying Louis Bao, like
right.
Louis
Yeah.
C.K. or something.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, man. The thing that the green tea takes from my point of view, the thing that the green tea takes into the fermentation process that this tea doesn't take is it has an ability to cool the body a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, so this tea for me is warming, like it's just warming
Yeah,
all the
for
way.
sure. Yeah.
Leo on can be a little bit more on the warming side or a little more on the cooling side, depending on how long it's been aged. And it
Hmm.
always has a different quality to it than this will.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, it's an awesome tea as well, and it's used for like people drink these two teas for similar purposes. Old people will drink them a lot in Malaysia,
Hmm.
for digestive support and because they like it, and like they'll drink it after meals usually. Uh, but this is also one of the nice teas. Like you can drink. Some people will have stomach sensitivity to drinking like a really green tea or a young sheng. Like we've all had a young sheng that's really caused us some distress if you've
Yeah.
been around for long enough, right?
Yeah.
And this is a tea that you can likely drink because it's a little bit warmer. It's easier on your digestive system and it won't cause those same effects.
Yeah. You were mentioning earlier how one of the things you really appreciate about tea is it was your first kind of experiential, well, not your first, but you really got to experience the medicine and have a relationship with it, as and most of what you're doing in Chinese medicine is herbs. So in kind of honing the depth of your relationship and understanding of working with a particular plant medicine, how has that shifted how you approach working with other medicines?
Right. That's a good question, man. I think so. Feeling what tea does in my body, that basic practice of like checking in and applying the kind of mindfulness, for lack of a better term, to what's happening with me when I drink the tea. has caused me to pay more attention to when I take an herbal formula, for a certain process or a certain problem, like what happens with that, because it's the same thing in in a different dosage. Herbal medicine is generally trying to be more direct and stronger than tea is. I think the basic attention that you train when you work with tea, if you choose to work with it in an intentional, like the way that you and I learned to work with it, builds a kind of skill set that allows a person to take that. You take that skill set with you wherever you go.
Shortly after I started learning tea in this way, I mean, my eating habits changed. The choices that I was making in terms of what I decided to eat was more thoughtful, and also listening. Like I remember distinctly being in the supermarket and just standing in front of a thing of vegetables and just standing there and waiting for an indication,
Yeah,
right? Some internal indication that this was the right
right.
thing, you know? Just being very slow and patient with the process, and not necessarily immediately going from like a past memory of what I always do, So it's a lot to do with listening.
A lot to do with listening. That's a great word.
Yeah.
I think listening in particular is a good word for it, because we spend so much time trying to see things, and we spend so much time with visual stuff that the listening part often gets. We need to train that again, or we need to remember how to listen. And this is a
It's
good
like it's
that.
so easy to skip the listening part, because after you've seen
Right.
something a number of times, a pathway or something is there, so that you don't have the same mental. It kind of becomes a habit.
Becomes a habit. Yeah.
You stop listening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We make the mistake of thinking we know what something is because we've seen it, and we don't listen to it, or something like that.
Which is so challenging. And I often wonder, like, for every one thing that I recognize that I'm doing that, right? Like I'm not listening, how many hundreds, thousands of things are so far habitual that I'm not even aware anymore. And then, knowing that to be true, what can I do to kind of like dig out the roots of those things, so that, more and more things become conscious choices.
Exactly.
This is a really beautiful color now. This, I have another, sorry, we like the same. This one took a little bit to get to this color for me.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it is the amount of leaf I'm using or the temperature of the water. Well, I'm using boiling water, so it's not that. Because I have another 20-year Liu Bao, Liu Bao, and it gets darker earlier, I feel.
Yeah, sure. I think some of it may have to do with the size of the leaf. Sometimes
Yeah, the other leaves are bigger.
yeah, right. That'll change it, and also like how long you let it steep.
Right.
Change it.
But I generally do that about the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a very patient steeper.
Yeah, I'm not very patient.
I'm like, I would prefer to drink more liquid. I mean, it's not even a mental decision. I just, I'm just like, okay, this is ready to drink in some form. Yeah, I like this tea. It's nice.
Good, man. I'm glad you like it.
So how often in Chinese medicine, how often because we talk about this time of year, this season, like, but what are how many seasons or times of year are there? Like, how often does it switch?
So there's a couple of different ways to categorize that. So seasonally, um, there's 4 seasons, and then so uh, there's the 5 elements, and 2 different ways that the 5 elements can be arranged. One of them is to have them all on the same line, like in a circle.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, interpreting the seasons means um, the 5th season would be like late summer, and that would correlate to the earth element.
Hmm.
The other way to talk about the 5 elements is to put the 4 on the outside and earth in the center. And that would mean that in every transition between the seasons, the earth element is present. So
Hmm.
that model I find a little bit more helpful, to think about like each transition of the season being belonging to the earth element, as opposed to like having the earth element given
Right. So the earth element is ever present, and it's just when the particular expression of the season isn't so overpowering
exactly.
that the stillness falls to the common denominator, which is earth.
Exactly, right? And none of the other elements can exist without earth. They all stand up on earth, or they're held by earth in some way. So
Right.
earth gets that.
So right now we're in winter, which is which element?
Winter is water element, the water element.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have guessed wind, but maybe that's just because I'm in the mountains and it's windy.
So when the Chinese elements are, I always tell people to think of them like elements instead of the elements, because like when we think of elements, we think like, oh, like water is like put water in a bucket kind of thing. But what water does in its movement is it goes down and it spreads out.
Uh-huh.
So like the movement of the chi at this time is like down and out, like that.
Yeah.
And for the first part of that, it's going to be more like metal. It's going to be like coming off of the fall season, which is the metal element. The metal goes like this in its direction. So it's going to be down, it's going to be in.
All right. So this next one is called red tea drops. So what's the background on this tea?
So so this is a red tea, and it's a special red tea, because so a lot of the teas that are commonly fed are teas that come from the bush version of the tea plant, uh, and then there's a very select few that are made from the tree version of the tea plant, and the same version that the pu'er tea is made. So this red tea is made from the tree, actually. And the cool thing about this tea, these we call them drops, because saying tea balls is a little bit strange.
Yeah.
But the drops are nice. There's a lot of tea in this, and it's going to last a really long time. So um, if you have a pick, it's you could break this up into halves, and it would be more than enough tea for one session.
Cool. Yeah, it's really pretty.
Is sourced by some friends of mine, um, and it's from Yunnan, of course, the same place where the pu'er tea comes from.
Now, do you generally prefer a Gaiwan over a pot?
Man, it depends a lot on my mood and the tea that I'm using. I I will use Gaiwans when I'm pouring tea for people first, like when they're trying tea out. I almost always use a Gaiwan because I feel like it gives people a very neutral experience. It doesn't add much and it doesn't take much away. If I'm using, so typically I would drink. I have different pots that I use to drink different kinds of tea. I have um, right here. This is the pot. This is a pot that I got when I was in Yixing, and I use this pot to drink most of my dark teas. So like the Liu Bao that we just had. If I'm drinking by myself, I'll probably use this pot, and I'll use aged shungs, shows, anything like that that's dark. I'll drink in this pot. Um, I also have a similar guy to what you're using there. And this guy I'll use to drink anything. This is kind of one of the dynamic pots that I have. And then I also have one back here. And this one I'll use more specifically for young sheng pu'er that I don't want to be too rambunctious. Um,
Because it flattens out the energy. Is that?
exactly, it grounds it. Yeah, yes, really, really helpful in that way. Yeah, but guy ones I use because they don't add or subtract very much. That's been my experience of using guy ones.
Hmm. I mean, this kind of the smell. I mean, it definitely has that red tea smell, but it also it reminds me of like an aged white tea or a young sheng. You know, it has that those floral notes to it, but also kind of like the indicator that there's going to be some energy up here.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how this tea makes you feel.
You know,
It's
I've been
oh,
drinking red tea more frequently these days, which you know I would always avoid red and black teas. Not necessarily that I would necessarily avoid them, but I just wouldn't have them. You know, they wouldn't come
it
up.
would, yeah.
But now they're coming more frequently, and you know I like them. They're good. Is that? Do you think that's a seasonal thing?
I do think it's a seasonal thing. I'm the exact same way. Right now, that's another reason that I picked these teas. Both of these teas are on the warming side.
Yeah.
They're also teas that I will just gravitate to this time of year. Like this is what I'm drinking right now. These teas.
But this is already like you know up here, but not in a wow, I just had crazy deja vu. Damn it, I've done this before. um, that was interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, this tea will also take a little bit of time to open up um, because it's in that ball. Just it's like a little bit compressed.
Yeah, which is nice, you know, which is nice for red tea because all the red teas that I have are loose leaf.
Yeah,
And um, to me, it's nice to have an experience of a slower start with the red tea specifically because if you just get right into it on the first steeping because it's all the leaf is already so exposed to the water, it's fine. It's great, but it's just the kind of like foreplay, you know,
Mhm.
is nice with the to have it packed. But yeah,
There's
to me, this is definitely more activating up here than the Liu Bao,
definitely, yep. Hmm.
but not in like a young shung way, like where it's like too much. It's just like I could I could do something right now,
Hmm.
like if I needed to do some work or something that required mental concentration, go on a walk, you know. But yeah, the Liu Bao does not facilitate that same type of.
No. Now the Liu Bao is really great. I like that one for like morning meditation stuff.
What's the deal with drinking tea? Because I've heard it from who told me this. Is the really well respected Chinese medicine doctor in Portland.
Oh yeah, Liu He.
Yeah,
We have Liu Bao, Liu An, Liu, right?
yeah. So I went to her once, and I don't recall exactly what she said, but it was something about drinking tea early in the day and something about its relationship to food, and maybe that you want to make sure you eat some food, or I forget exactly what it is. But do you know what she's
Dude,
talking about?
yeah, she actually before I started going to OCOM, I went to see her privately and she told me the exact same thing, I think. So I
Mhm,
can read it to you. She's big on not drinking tea on an empty stomach.
mhm.
So if you haven't had any food at all, the same goes for coffee. It's the same thing. Um, that if you drink tea, so a lot of tea will have this effect where it will increase the power of the digestive system.
Mm.
And if there isn't food there, it'll just, the stomach will basically digest itself in a certain
That
way.
doesn't sound good.
It doesn't sound good. So the metaphor she used for me was, it's like trying to boil water in a pot without any water in the pot.
Uh,
So the pot just gets burned.
yeah.
Um,
So
but I
when she's saying food in your stomach, like what's the minimum that is gonna address that? Like, can
um,
you?
it can be quite minimal in my experience. Like if I'm drinking tea in the morning, this is the rule that I follow. Actually, I don't usually drink tea if I haven't had anything to eat.
Mhm.
But I'll eat like a rice cracker or two or three,
Uh,
just something in my stomach.
Something small.
Yeah.
And is there a period of time that you wait?
Ideally, you probably don't want to drink tea while you're full on the food that you've just eaten. But I haven't found it to be much of a problem for me. There's certain situations where, like the Liu Bao, you can drink Liu Bao or any kind of pu'er, depending on like what you're looking for. And if you've eaten a big meal, those teas should help you digest that meal.
Right.
Have a little bit of, from a Chinese medicine point of view, they have a little bit of a bitter flavor. That flavor will help facilitate the movement of that food through your system.
Right. I think I'll start doing that, like just something small.
Yeah, play with it, see how you feel.
Yeah, but I don't want to ruin my pot.
Don't want to ruin your pot, man. Yeah. No, actually, teas. So that's the other thing. Teas that are warm in nature, like this tea, would be much harmful to your stomach if you were to drink it with no food in it.
Mhm.
But the teas that are hard, like if you get if you get clean tea, that you're drinking clean tea, and you drink that tea and it still gives you a headache, one of the reasons to that will happen, you feel like that rising kind of energy, right? If it's
Right.
clean,
You get a headache, so a little headache, something like that.
exactly. So some of that can be because the tea hasn't been stored well, or it was mistreated, or it has
Mhm.
pesticides, or whatever, any of those things. But if none of that's the case, the reason that that's happening or the quickest way to stop that from happening is to eat some food,
Mm.
because the stomach will, it kind of like grounds itself, grounds the body, and then from a Chinese medicine point of view, that kind of upsurgent action, that like headiness,
Yeah.
that's the wood element, the liver going like that. So if sort of increase the load that the earth has, the wood won't be able to do that as much because it kind of checks it
Right.
anyway.
Okay. So wood is like this.
Hmm.
Uh, and then what's the only other one we haven't talked about air. So what is air then? Chi
So
maybe?
air, so in China, air doesn't, in the Chinese element system, air doesn't really exist. It's the closest I think would be to wood, and wood is specifically like um, wood is up, but it's also out. It's like a seed, that the sprout that bursts from the seed. So it's like from the center out. That's like what wood is. Fire is really up and out. That's the most yang. And then
Uh,
earth is like
so wood
consolidated.
is still considered yang.
Say that again.
Wood is still considered yang, but it's
Wood,
just not as yang as fire.
definitely. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this tea. It's nice.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine who poured this tea at an event, and he said that he was speaking to an older woman, poured the tea for her. She really liked it, and she bought some from him. And then he didn't know this at the time, but she had vertigo symptoms, some
Mm.
dizziness, some tinnitus, the ringing in the ears a little bit with that. And she started to drink this tea over the next week, and both of those symptoms decreased quite
Mm.
significantly. They weren't gone, but they did decrease quite significantly. So
Great.
uh, I
What is
don't
it
know.
about tea that makes it so it's such an amazing medicine?
Yeah, right.
No,
You,
I'm asking.
you're, you're
What? Give me
missed
the answer.
that and mistook your question for a statement. So, what is it about this tea that makes it a good medicine? There's a couple of things, I think. Um, it does. So, like your experience there of, um, I can feel this tea go to my head, and but not like shoot me up
Right.
like Shang Shang, right? So when I drink this tea, I feel it like I feel it like if I could demonstrate with my hands, I feel it do this motion.
Mm.
Like it kind of opens things up like that in a slow stretching way that a Tai Chi move might do. Um, and it does open up my head. So what that means, I think medically, is that it dilates blood vessels. It sends, from a Chinese medicine point of view, it's going to move qi and blood in the head. And if there's stuckness in any way, shape, or form, that stuckness is going to be a little bit alleviated by the tea. Tea
Right.
is also diuretic, so it's going to take fluid that's stuck in the body and take it out. So if that's part of the person's pattern, part of the reason that that problem exists, sometimes vertigo and dizziness is caused by fluid buildup in the ear.
Yeah, I notice even just tension in the back of the neck and the shoulders dissipates with this tea.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a nice feature.
Nice.
I like tea. I mean, if I wasn't already into it, I would totally get into
I
it.
would hook, line, and sinker. I would dive right into this tea, you know?
It's great.
This tea, strangely enough, is one that I've poured for people very late at night, and very few people have trouble sleeping after the tea. That's another nice thing about it.
And what year do you know what year these tea drops are?
This is 27.
2017.
Yep.
Cool. It's good for Halloween.
Oh yeah.
Just put them in a bowl.
Yeah. Put them in a bowl. Be an interesting situation. Come to your house. It's like a ball of tea.
Yeah, you'd probably get toilet papered.
Yeah.
Great teas. I'm glad I have these. The red tea specifically is I think of these two teas as mine because I have an aged Liu Bao, which
Yeah.
I'll have to keep drinking this one that you gave me because it definitely I feel like it's gentler than the one that I have, which in a specific circumstance is good, right? It's like, okay, I want the relaxing and grounding qualities of the Liu Bao, but I don't want to journey right now.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's kind of how I would use this tea. But to be honest, in my life right now, it's not often that I don't want to do the deep work. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just a personal thing. But that's the amazing thing about tea is like,
Yeah.
you can make those choices and distinctions. But yeah, the red tea is great. I'll definitely be drinking this one.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for these. We'll talk soon.